So in our process lifecycle, we first start by starting the process. So let's say we have, for example, an executable that we first start. The first thing that's going to happen is the entire executable is copied into RAM and a process is created. Now remember that the process is very similar to a dedicated zone in memory. And remember what we've talked about with virtual memory. Now this process is going to have an entire virtual memory zone for itself. So that represents this virtual memory with this block starting at address 0 and ending at address here. There. Now what's going to happen is the entire executable is going to be loaded into this virtual memory space. So typically it's going to go here. Next thing what we talked about is dynamic linking. So the linker is going to be started and is going to look for all the required libraries. And the libraries are going to be loaded in different segments and around here. Now an important thing to notice is that the libraries are themselves made up of different zones. For example, an SDL library might have some zones that are readable, some that are executable, for example, the functions, but no zones where you can actually write things because all the libraries are shared amongst all the processes that use them. So it would be a big risk. And then we have two very special zones that we're going to use all the time, which are the heap and the stack. So typically when you have a program, you have what's called the heap when you are storing really essential information and you are storing them in memory for a very long time. And the stack is used for local variables or variables you are using inside a function. So let's say, for example, you have your C function, let's say the main, let's not put anything here. In my main function, I am using an integer value. So let's say a equals 42. This integer value is going to go inside of the stack because its scope is only local to the main function. I can also allocate some memory inside the heap and pass this reference to other functions in my program. To do that, we are going to use a very specific function which can be found in the libc library, which is a very important library for all your system, and this function is called malloc. So let's say malloc, and we're going to see what we put in here later. The malloc function is not going to return you an integer, it's going to return you a pointer, so an address of a variable that lives somewhere inside the heap. So it's not going to return you a variable, it's going to return you a pointer to a variable, let's call it b. And now I can set the value of the address at b to any kind of value. So for example, I can say b equals 43. And what happens when I do this line is that I am actually going to go inside my b variable. Now let's keep in mind the b variable is itself stored into the stack. The address of the b or what the malloc returns is stored into the stack. And I am going to dereference this variable and go into the heap and look for the address that malloc returned me and write at this address. And I'm going to write 43. So then if I give this b variable to any other function, I'm not going to give it directly the 43 number, I'm going to give it the address of where I put this 43 number. So that's really interesting, but you must not forget that when you are done using the b variable, you must also free it. So you deallocate the memory. If you don't, you're going to have memory leaks, and that's going to be a big problem. So what we've seen is that the libraries are loaded into the RAM and are shared amongst processes if you're using dynamic linking. Your entire virtual space has a couple of things you must remember. First, you load the program at the top of the virtual space. You have a heap when you are storing any kind of stuff that you might need. And you have a stack that grows from the bottom to the top, where you are storing any local variables you are using inside your functions.